Week 1 of high school football in the Los Angeles section is in the books. This is the Southern California Prep Insiders Football Podcast. Alongside Keith DeMolder, I'm Connor Morissette. Keith, last week we gave the viewers our initial podcast, the preseason podcast, and already through Week 1, a lot has changed in our top 10, and there have been some breakout performances. It's really great once people start playing because that's when all the talk, it goes away, and you got to show what you can do on the field.
Yeah, a lot of our predictions were correct, but then some of them kind of went by the wayside. So a lot of changes in the top 10. We saw some big wins. We also saw some big slip-ups. We'll get into those a little bit, but what did you see from some of the top 2 teams?
Yeah, so I know we were both at the Dorsey game, and they came in to our top 10 last week at number 2. They had a tough game at Agora High School against Calabasas, losing 35-12 in that one. Just looked outmatched really from the beginning to end. We still have them fairly high in our top 10 because they are a very good team in the LA City section. And by the way, we're here at Dorsey High School, so I don't want to trash talk them too much, but they had a tough Week 1 game against Calabasas.
Yeah, the Calabasas Coyotes, they came in with a lot of firepower, especially on the vertical attack, bringing everything. A lot of their receivers were just big. They were big guys. They could really stretch the field. They also had a decent running attack considering that their quarterback was just throwing darts all over the field. So that's
Jaden Casey would look great, the sophomore.
Oh, yeah.
Calabasas.
No doubt about it. But looking at Dorsey, they had some pluses, particularly on special teams. Dion Baskin with a 98-yard punt return. That was nice. And then we saw Charles Mincy actually get injured during that game.
He was able to come back, but yeah, he was shaken up, struggled in this one. His backup, Juwan Collins, had a nice return for a touchdown. But really, those were the 2 highlights for Dorsey in that game. A tough game, a tough way to start for them, but we know in the LA City section they will be very difficult to beat. On Friday, Keith, I had a chance to go to Narbonne High School to check out their game against Serra. The offense in that game struggled. They were down 14-0 in the third quarter. Then a quick pick 6 from DeMonte Peoples really turned that game around. Narbonne was able to win 17-14 to get the win over rival Serra. I'm not really sure how much I should take away from the offense in that game because Serra's such a good defensive team, such a good Southern Section team, but I think the fact that Narbonne was able to win means they deservedly should lead our top 10 again this week, and they will.
Yeah, Jalen Chapman, not the most precise per se in that game, but he still got the W, which against a team like Serra says a lot. Able to put up 17 points, that says a lot about a team. That said, it needs to get better.
He had a crucial 1-yard TD run in that game. In a game, he struggled a lot, but he made the play when it mattered, and Narbonne took that one 17-14. A few other scores I want to touch on. Palisades beat Cleveland 37-28 in a high-scoring game. San Pedro, they're going to be the biggest risers on our top 10, which we'll get to in a second. They won big 42-14 over Southeast. And then Crenshaw, they had a really tough game against South Hills on the road, falling 24-8. A quarterback who was ineligible in that one, and really that hurt them.
Yeah, ineligibilities all over the LA City section. They've come to hurt teams. They come to help teams. It's kind of the way it goes with all these transfers. So we'll probably see a more accurate picture come October into November.
Garfield, another big winner in the LA City section in Week 1. And Keith, let's go now right into our top 10. We had some changes already. We're not even into really too many weeks here, but our top 10 looks different than it did earlier last week because now the teams have played. We see who's for real and who's not, and Torres comes in as the number 10 team. I know they have a big-time player who you're very high on.
Oh, yeah, Taquan Gilmore. Folks, unbelievable. Probably one of the best performances in Week 1. 7 total touchdowns. Over 200 yards rushing. Had 4 touchdowns rushing. He had a pick 6. He had a punt return for a touchdown. And he also had a forced fumble. So the guy can score any which way on defense as well as offense. Really an MVP for that week. And they had a big win. And that's why they kind of catapult into that 10th spot. They're facing a little bit less competition, but I think they have a chance to go undefeated if Gilmore plays the way he's been playing.
Looking at 9 now, we're moving to Crenshaw. They were 5 last week for us, but their loss against South Hills drops them to 9. I still expect them with that high-powered offense. If they can get their quarterback eligibility situation figured out, I think they'll be a dangerous team in LA.
Yeah, their defense is probably one of the stronger points of their team, and I think that South Hills they come in from the southern section. They're not necessarily the most dominating team offensively, but that said, it was still a close game throughout. So I think that Crenshaw, once they get their quarterback back, they'll end up being a force to be reckoned with.
Coming up now with 8 and 7, 2 teams that lost their Week 1 games in the LA section. El Camino Real, 26-10 losers to St. Bonaventure at a neutral location. And then Birmingham, they lost a close one, 33-28 at Harvard Westlake. So even though those two teams have started slowly, I still anticipate them to do some damage in the LA City section. They're still very good, just playing some tough opponents in Week 1.
Yeah, St. Bonaventure is not a team you want to mess with for El Camino Real. They kept it close, only a 16-point game right there. And Birmingham had the lead actually going into the final minutes, but there was a snafu with a blocked field goal that Birmingham recovered, and then they lost the ball back, gave it back to Harvard Westlake. Harvard Westlake ended up scoring and winning that game. So a game that could have really gone either way. Birmingham won. We would have had them high in the top 10, but I think 7's a good place for them.
Now going to 6, Garfield. They had a big-time win over Montebello, 39-36. That was probably the best game in the city section, and so they go from 10 on our list all the way up to number 6, and I think deservedly so. Absolutely.
You know, it was a close game throughout, but Garfield ended up pulling away there towards the end. Obviously, you don't like to see it that close, a 3-point game, and Montebello ended up coming back there at the end, almost won it. But needless to say, Garfield's offense is firing on all cylinders.
Now to number 5, LA High. They stay in a very similar spot to last week. I think they were 6. They didn't have a game, so really tough to evaluate them so far. 4, Dorsey. We've touched on them. They went from 2. Now they fall to 4 after losing to a very, very stacked Calabasas team. So I don't want to take too much away from them. But like we said earlier, they didn't look great, so I think they deserve to fall 2 spots. Yeah, that's what I'll say. Looking at the offensive line, they weren't as dominant as you like to see as well. The snap from the center to the quarterback just wasn't there all night. You saw multiple fumbles, multiple offensive line penalties called, and penalties just in general. I think there was over 100 yards of penalties called against Dorsey, so they need to be a little bit more disciplined. I'm sure that's what they're talking about in practice this week. Into the top 3, the 3 teams in the LA section with some big wins. Palisades Charter, they beat Cleveland 37-28. Baraka Beckett with a big game for them on the defensive line. He's their big-time transfer. I think they're going to make some serious noise this season. They look dangerous in Week 1. Oh yeah, absolutely. Their defensive line is where it all starts, and Beckett, probably one of the best defensive ends in the section this year. Obviously, he shot with that touchdown return. But that said, they can put points on the board, and Cleveland's not a team you want to mess with as well. So we'll see how they fare in the meat of their schedule once they go back into league play. Into the top 2, the biggest riser on our list this week, it's San Pedro. People were very angry that we did not have them on our initial top 10. Well, to all the haters out there, we've responded. They're number 2 now. They've skyrocketed from unranked to number 2, and that's because they absolutely crushed Southeast 42-14. They're the biggest risers in the poll, and I think it's deservedly so. Oh yeah, absolutely. The ability to put over 40 points on the board just shows how their offense is really in tune. They bring in a lot of new guys, but it's clearly working for them. Yeah, 2 perfect spot there for San Pedro. No change at the top. Narbonne reclaims the top spot in our poll for the 2nd consecutive week after their big win over Serra, but question marks for them on the offensive side. They struggled running the ball with Keyshawn Dupree a little bit. He did have some big-time carries, but he's a bit banged up. They're missing a transfer in Jamar Jefferson, who's been ineligible, and then passing the ball, Jalen Chapman struggled, missing some receivers who were key last year, so that's going to be something to watch this season. Is the Narbonne offense good enough to stay number 1 the whole year? That'll be the question, especially coming into this really tough non-conference schedule. I think once they get back into the conference and playing city section teams, that's when they'll start to shine, because the talent they've been playing as of late, I mean, Serra is one of the top teams in Southern California, so once they start playing that easier competition, their starters will start to shine. Time now for our game ball segment. Who are some of the best players in the LA City section this week? We have 4 top performers that we want to recognize, and Keith, we'll start with you. I know your first game ball player. You've already talked about him a little bit, but he deserves the recognition. Yeah, the man with the fancy feet, Quan Gilmore out of Torres High. Unbelievable performance in week 1. 7 touchdowns, as we mentioned. He had a punt return, he had an interception return, he had a kick return for 80 yards for a touchdown, and then 4 rushing touchdowns, average over 25 yards per carry. He just could not be stopped that night, folks, scoring every single one of Torres' touchdowns. So that just goes to show you how vital he is to that team. Game ball for him. I like to see how he fares against some tougher competition coming when they have league play.
That said, I'm going to go to the other side of the ball now. Dion Bascom, he had a 98-yard punt return in that game against Calabasas. He has playmaking ability for sure and likely to go D1.
Now to my two game ball players, both on the defensive end. My first player, Baraka Beckett from Palisades, the transfer. I talked about him a little bit earlier, but he had a 37-yard fumble recovery that he ran back for a touchdown. So pick sixes are common, returns are common for touchdowns, but fumble recoveries for touchdowns, you don't see that every day. So shout out Baraka Beckett, you had a fantastic game, helping Palisades Charter beat Cleveland. And then my other game ball goes to DeMonte Peoples, the cornerback for Narbonne. His pick six against Sarah absolutely changed the whole complexion of that game. Narbonne was doing nothing on offense. They get a defensive touchdown. That allowed them to get back into the game. And from there, they knocked off Sarah 14-7. So Baraka Beckett, DeMonte Peoples, keep up the good work. You guys get game balls from me this week. Let's go to our predictions now, Keith. I was 0-2 last week. I thought Narbonne was going to lose, and I screwed that up. Thought Dorsey was going to win, screwed that up too. You were 1-1. You picked Narbonne and Dorsey, so we both were wrong with Dorsey. Let's see if we can really set the record straight here. The first game, we got 3 on our slate that I want to touch on. Narbonne against Long Beach Poly at El Camino College. I picked against Narbonne last week. I'm not going to make that mistake again. I know I have some questions with their offense, but I'm taking Narbonne this week.
Oof, I'm actually going reverse this week. I'm going with Long Beach Poly. They beat Los Alamitos. So that was on primetime TV. I think they have what it takes, especially on offense. Narbonne, I don't know. They had it. They had a game go, back and forth against Sarah, and they just pulled it out the last second. Need better execution on offense if you're going to try and beat the best talent in the Southern California area.
As a nice flag football game is going on to the side of us here, Birmingham, Notre Dame, the second game on our slate. I like Notre Dame in this one. I think there's no stopping them. That is a juggernaut team. Birmingham's going to have their hands full.
Absolutely. Notre Dame's a huge power out of Sherman Oaks, and I think that Birmingham, while they had the close loss against Harvard Westlake, I think that they're also going to fall to Notre Dame as well. They're going to keep it close, though. Don't forget that. But I think ultimately Notre Dame's going to pull that one.
And then finally, Keith, Venice against El Camino Real. Both teams were losers in week 1. I'm going to go with El Camino Real in this game. I think they bounce back and get the win against Venice and get their first win of the season.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. I think Venice, their rushing attack is going to be a little bit too much for El Camino Real. It'll be a close game for sure. These two teams were in our top 10, so we'll see how they do.
Keith, any final thoughts after week 1 that you want to offer to the viewers? I think it's been a very fun week 1. I've really enjoyed covering it, and I can't wait for the rest of the season. Those would probably be my sign-off thoughts. Anything from you?
Yeah, I'm just excited to see the rest of this week, see how these teams rebound, especially after losing in week 1. I think that's really what's going to show the mental toughness of some of these teams, is their ability to bounce back, especially after huge losses. So we'll come back next week and we'll see who's winner and who's a loser.
SCPrepinsider.com and at SCPrepInsiderLA on Twitter is where you can find us online. For Keith DeMolder, I'm Connor Morissette. Check back next week, same time, same place for our Week 3 football podcast. Hopefully Week 2 goes well this week. Thanks so much.